Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin takes me back to the time met you on a Friday, halfway out at the door of the club, playing soul on the weekends. Stayed in bed till Wednesday. Fell in love with you right there and then. I was young, couldn't see that. Leather jacket, though it's too cold. Saw your face in the crowd, and I think without eyes. Her just perfect, yeah, she's beautiful. Never thought you'd be here, it took me by surprise when I met you in the doorway. And a friend of a friend, never thought I would see you this soon, but hope she really loves you, 'cause I swear you deserve everything. Wish that I knew that sooner. We got sober, it was over, but I told you I'd do it all over again. At your place over spring break, a heartache, I'd do it all over again. Do it all over again. Tell me a lie, and I tell you too. I say that I'm happy for the two of you. You wanna be friends, but I don't think I can. But I wanna be happy, happy for you.
Talk to me nice, talk to me honestly. Look in my eyes, don't let it fall on me. Say you're a good guy, make me believe it. Don't wanna hear it, I wanna see it. See how rewind, when we rewind, feels so nice. We time, you, I know
fire, I could conquer the night. If I can make it, if I try to draw the red light, I could run through the fire, I could conquer the night. If I can make it, if I try to draw the red,
Thinking that I could have done something, but now I'm left with an empty heart. No making amends, no waking up beside you and holding you till we forget it all. How could I know there was no second chances? Like dominoes, my life got really scattered. You couldn't keep the door shut, and now the frostbite's creeping in. 'Cause I've been stone cold since you left me here. So come home, why won't you reappear? Things that I said came out totally wrong. Can't speak of the truth when it's tainted. I fell into a big black hole. It got me stone cold. Wizard of Oz can't undo what I've done. Completely out of luck this time. I'm stuck in reverse. I gotta get away now, but I can't seem to take the lead. why won't you reappear? Things that I said came out totally wrong.
Welcome everyone to the second installation of Industry Insights for the Bandhouse University All-Stars Season 2. We have so many amazing things coming towards you guys this week and this season with a new format, new teams, and everything else lovely coming up. But moving on to today. Today you're going to have myself, Santa, and the one, the only, Zironic. Welcome, guys.
Damn, this is so fucking professional.
Not what you expected, huh?
I'm surprised. It's nice.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great to have you on. Thank you so much for agreeing to it. And it's going to be an amazing time. So I think, just getting the first question we kind of get out of the way every time is, how did you really get started, especially within, Siege? I'm sure everyone knows the story, but for, the people who are slightly newer to the scene.
Well, I originally played like every other shooter, and I tried Siege during the beta, and I absolutely hated it. The idea of getting shot through walls just seemed so dumb. Then I gave it another chance when it came out. I think actually my first playday was December 15th, 2015 or something, whenever the game came out. And then I just never really stopped after that. Happened to get an offer into a competitive team, and after I eventually quit that, then this is what happened where we are now.
Fair enough. I mean, starting off, just an amazing running, jumping onto, the casting, the analysis. It's an amazing little, jump you've made, and certainly now to the content creating for Natus Vincere. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, so I think when Siege kind of started, it wasn't that I was, I wasn't good at it. There was just not that many people they could ask that also had competitive experience, because the sport was so new. So if you needed to find someone that had played comp and that wanted to talk about it, then there really wasn't many, because everyone was still playing. And then after that, I guess eventually if you get a bit of traction, then you get some offers here and there. With the new skin program, organizations have a benefit in having content creators linked to it. So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up where we are.
Yeah, I mean, many years into the scene, and progressing as an esport, especially from where we started off, from just being in a small studio to now have across multiple regions, and every region now being streamed. And after being at so many events, doing so many programs, especially, what do you think would be the few highlights or some of the highlights you have from your career so far, if it's from playing or being an analyst?
It's super difficult because you're gonna be a bit narcissistic when looking at those things, right? So Invitational, there was one time where there was this portrait on the screen of some of us. It was Parker, Macy, Ammunition, and Iron. I think some others as well. That is without a doubt a massive highlight, because it feels like some of the work you put in paid off. Getting the Charmin game, definitely. Honestly, the Gon 6 being added is a massive thing to me. I'm really happy that thing is added to the game, because I've been ranting about that for so long. And it just feels like you have some sort of a small but positive impact here and there. And then I think Rio, just being able to say that you've worked in an Olympic stadium, it sounds insane.
I mean, Rio was an amazing event to kind of watch from around the world. And I mean,
so
Brazil has had two major events. You had Sao Paulo and you had Rio.
Yeah.
Sao Paulo was certainly an event to remember for other nations, especially watching from around the world.
Yeah, I was watching that one from at home as well. I was only at Rio, but I will say no one gets even close to the Brazilian crowd. It is so loud in there. The whole place was shaking.
I can imagine, with just Brazilians as being just by far one of the loudest crowds, some of the most energetic.
They're very passionate. I
can imagine what it's like in like those stadiums. And especially looking back over the past few years, is there any kind of stand out like the one above the rest? You've worked this event or the other, because you also online can be like either working from home, as in quite a few casts did for a while, and then you have the new broadcast studios, everything else. I mean, what's kind of changed for you in regards to in the past year?
Well, last Invitational was the best event I've ever been at, and the fact that we didn't go to this one, or that this one didn't happen, sucks. It really sucks. I don't know how involved I'm gonna be in stuff like Invite and EUL in the future, because there's like, during this whole work from home thing, there are so many other offers coming up, and like, there's just a lot of options, and you still gotta pay bills. So I've said yes to some things here and there, and it complicates how much time you have to invest into that. I'm not saying it's a closed chapter yet, but it's unlikely that I'm going to be involved at the same level, at least in the esport.
I mean, with this year and the Invitational being postponed, you guys had the Logic Problem podcast,
yeah,
on the main broadcast. Was that something that was kind of that you guys had already together for the live SI, or was that just like, we're doing it online now, and we still like want you guys to come on for the like a broadcast aspect?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe we would have had it if it was like, if we pretend like COVID wasn't a thing, and it was a live event and everyone could travel there, we would most likely have had like a segment there instead at the venue. But with COVID being a thing, they had to get this done, and the show match, our podcast, all of that was done quite a bit in advance. So you had some time to figure out, if anything's changing. But with the idea of the invite maybe being held anyway, and then having it limited to who would go there, there was no way that we would have went to the event. It would still have been a pre-recorded one, and then shown during the event. And then I know there was a few people that were surprised that it was pre-recorded, but like, that's how that world works. You're not gambling sending two doofuses on a podcast for a couple 100,000 people, and then they could say something dumb or break an NDA live or whatever it might be.
I was going to say that, because especially with the pre-recording, I mean, I don't know why a lot of people were surprised at it, because like you were saying, it is so easy for something to to slip out, or to say something you're not meant to, especially for the devs, of just going, oh yeah, for example, it's like, yeah, we did this rework, for, let's say, with Capital's rework later on this year, and just absolutely just breaking that.
And everyone goes pale and goes, oh, we were not supposed to say that. Yeah, like, all of those are going to be pre-recorded. That's just how it is.
Well, yes, on the topic of competitive play, you used to play for Plain Ducks, correct?
Yes, I've played for a few teams. I started on a small team called Warrior Team France. Well, small team, a French Pro League team, and there was a few language barriers there. It was pretty rough. And then eventually that evolved into Team Cooler Master, that then became Plain Ducks.
So what was it that sort of dragged you more away from the playing side, more into the sort of content side?
Well, the only reason I ended up quitting Pro League was because we got invited to E3. So the whole star player program thing happened, and I wanted to go to E3 no matter what. It was such a big thing. I've always wanted to go there, and we had a Pro League match during E3. So I had two options. I could either say no and play the Pro League match, or I could say yes to go to E3, and then we needed to find someone to step in and be a sub. But it feels weird to ask someone to take your place and be a sub, and then go to E3 and have fun for a week and come back and say, okay, you can fuck off now.
Yeah.
Like, that just doesn't feel right. So I took the sub spot on the team instead after that. And basically, if your team is running any kind of decent, you really don't need the sub spot. People are going to be there. It's only if someone gets sick or, things go really south. So eventually it made more business sense to not be part of a team, because the pay was not big enough back then. Like, we're completely transparent. We got paid $500 when that stuff started. $500 a month. You're not making a living doing that, right? We were one of the first teams in EU to get like a decent pay together with Penta, and like $500 is not something you can't justify not being contractually locked into something. So it made more sense to just jump out of it, and my stream was starting to just get enough traction at that point that it made sense to do so.
I mean, that's fair enough, and something that we also ask every time is like, because again, I'll say it again, after all these years, especially being involved in so many different levels of the esport from the many different roles you've had, is there any kind of stories that really stand out from like events or teams?
Well, I think one from the early time that everyone else needs to learn from, because we all made that mistake, is that people need to stop signing for a jersey. Do not put your signature on a piece of paper for a jersey or for a mouse or for anything else. If it isn't an actual like there needs to be a mutual benefit, right? Getting a mouse pad and a mouse and a jersey, and then an orc will tell you that they cover travel. You know what? Like every decent tournament, travel is covered by the event holders, right? So there's been a lot of players through time that have signed to teams and been locked into some sort of contractual obligation where they couldn't play for another team. And that's still happening today, and people should probably be a bit more careful with like, I know when we signed our first one, we were super excited and we just wanted to be part of a team, but there's a benefit for the team as well, and people kind of need to know their worth there.
Yeah, I mean, especially getting some actually just great advice, because it happens quite a bit. As an example, with nothing to do
happens
with
too much
tier 1 anymore, but still with tier 4, and in some cases with tier 3. And it's again with everything else. Do you have any I don't know how I can put this. It's just some of your favorite memories, or not necessarily at an event, but some amazing stories or some just amazing memories that you have of the scene.
Oh, there's been a few, but the good ones will always the good ones are the ones you can't tell. Those are the best. The one fun one, like I think a few people have heard this one a couple of times, was I think almost everyone ended up getting food poisoning in Poland when we were there for year 1, season 3. Everyone ate a burger and got extremely sick at the hotel. So in the morning there was like a massive line outside the shitter, and then everyone went to play their pro league games right after. So that was an interesting moment. But no, like most of the stuff that happens at events that isn't on screen kind of stays within the community, because people want to have you want to have a link, or you want to have like a wall between the private stuff and the public stuff, right? It's the same as when you put your phone down, you talk to people that aren't in your Twitter sphere or whatever. Most of the stuff that happens where there isn't a camera on, I don't think many people want to like talk about that or share it, because that's the one thing they have that stays between them, and it's kind of like that close knit thing when you're at events. The same, probably one of the reasons that people don't hear a lot of stories about after parties, and like it's only if someone falls and knocks their teeth out, it gets put on Twitter. But yeah, most of that stays with the people.
I think that's perfectly said. And I think the only thing that anyone's really heard about the after parties was either when players couldn't get in, or the karaoke that happened. That you should get a video shared every so often.
Yeah, never drink too much, and if you do, never ever dance or sing, because it will be on Twitter. That's guaranteed, and people will never let it go.
I can't imagine they would, because that's kind of the whole like the LAN vibe. I guess that is the best way to say it, is because that's why people go. You're gonna see people that you've played with for years, first time in person. It's the first time making like proper memories, especially if you're like thousands of miles away from where you call home.
It can be super weird, like first time you meet people, because you kind of have this like you have this idea of how they are. Like you might have seen them, right? But there's a big difference between having seen people on cam or played with them for a couple of years and then meeting them. It's really surreal, because you could have known people for a couple of years before you meet them, and been pretty close friends with them, right? But the first time you ever get a beer together, it's like 3 years after you started playing together. But it's also what makes it kind of cool. Like, there are people that I call really close friends that I have met maybe 6 or 7 times, but they have been literally everywhere around the world every time, right? Like, it's been Japan, Brazil, US, and the only time you really get to meet them is at events, because everyone else has, stuff to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of the amazing thing about esports, especially with Siege. Although we do have, a plagued community, it is there is that special little bit of it that you do tend to meet people or be friends with for years. But it does allow you to make those close connections, and that's especially what's really great and what I've loved about it for years.
Yeah, and the toxicity we normally struggle with on an online basis is non-existent when it goes to events. I think I've, in the entire time and all events combined, I've maybe seen like 2 or 3 cases of people kind of acting out, but that's about it. And it has almost always been because someone had a beer too many. So it's kind of impressive that we have this idea that, like, the online environment can be a bit toxic or a bit mouthy. As soon as you go to like a real event, it is so calm and everyone's lovely.
I mean, like you were saying about, how one big thing for you was that change between, do I play this Pro League game or do I go to E3? What do you think was, if it's not that, what do you think would be the most important step or your most important choice in your career that's kind of made you who you are today?
Well, quitting my real job and playing video games for a living is probably the most important thing. Because while I played Pro League, I still had a normal full-time job. So I worked for 7 years as a construction worker. And then I had night shift as a firefighter during that whole thing as well. And after Pro League, after E3, all of that, and streaming kind of started going pretty well. Like, I used to get home at 5 and then start streaming, and then I'd stream to like 11 at night, and then I'd go to bed and get up at 5. So that was kind of a tight schedule, and I was married. Well, I still am. At least I hope so. And yeah, I'm still married. Getting home and then streaming for that amount of time, getting like 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then working, it was too much. But you had to grind and build up enough, right, to gamble quitting your job and then putting everything into full-time content creation and esport. So that decision was difficult because I didn't wanna do it too early, but I also didn't wanna overwork for too long, because you can only do so and so long with no sleep and work all the time, right? And it's just not worth it. Because sure, you make a good amount of money while doing it, but you have no time to spend it. And that's kind of a shitty trade. So going full time is probably the biggest decision I've made, and I'm extremely happy that it ended up working. Because it is a massive gamble. Like, it can change overnight, right?
I mean, especially at the point of where we were as a community and as an esport at the time, especially, like, we were still in our infancy, nowhere near the place we are today. I mean, I think one of the easiest ways to explain how far we've come, although it is only one factor, but the invitational. I mean, look at just, especially because the community does contribute to that prize pool, but look at just the increments of just how it grows year by year. Just shows how we are just growing as an esport from like where we started off.
Go and watch the first games of Siege Pro League, like the actual first ones. I think they were in the UK. They played game day number 1 in the ESL studio in the UK. I think looking back at that, it was horrendous. Like, the game was a mess. You could barely see anything because everything was so dark and the lighting was weird, and even the production value was kind of bad, right? And then you compare it to SI 2020, where like you had, I think it was the biggest screen that has ever been in Canada, at least. It was like 2 IMAX screens next to each other. Or sorry, that was 2019. They had the two IMAX screens, but
Yeah.
still, like the improvement over time has been quite cool, and it's been nice to see it grow because I started with watching CS and Dota and StarCraft, and I always felt like when I was watching that, because it was the biggest, that was like the standard, and like you never knew how much more it could become, right? And then you saw TI for the first time, and it was mind-bogglingly big. And then you get involved in Siege, and it's these smaller events, and it's slowly building up. And now we have our Invitational, which is, I'm not gonna say it's on the same size as TI, but for a game the size of Siege, it is really big.
And especially like you were saying of like how it was when you started off, how you couldn't really see anything. That's also when we saw just, you know, when Pro League when everything was in the map pool, everything was up for grabs. Yep. And you had, I think one of my favorite games from the first season is just when House was played.
Yeah, Sisu Penta on House was hilarious.
It's you can just see the progression in just everything.
Yeah.
Even the little things that, you know, the community doesn't see, even if it's, you know, the little things of like leaning speed or those little changes that Ubisoft makes to make it more compatible with or more pleasing just to watch.
Yeah.
Like from an observation standpoint.
I think that's probably one of the biggest things that, like, it's hard to say because people don't really want to hear it, but most of the changes that are being done are done and should be done based on what is enjoyable to watch. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to sell, right? Like, people have to enjoy watching the game. Otherwise, competitive is just not going to exist. Well, competitive might exist, but it's not going to be big enough that anyone can make a living off it if no one wants to watch it. So I guess it ties into the whole idea that, like, as a community, if anyone wants to go competitive, you have to try and build something where you need to have value to an organization somehow. You need to have a brand that's big enough that people will want to hire you, because it's one thing being extremely good at the game, but if people don't know, then it means nothing. And ideally you want to be known for being good, funny, or something, right? Just so you can kind of sell yourself to a team or an org. And on the other hand, and from orcs point of view as well, not every org is doing or putting in the same amount of work to be memorable and to have like a lineup of people where you can build a fan culture around, right? It's super important for any competitive game, any esport that we have noticeable orcs and noticeable players that people can kind of relate to and be fans of, because otherwise it's just not going to work.
Well, because one of those entry points is especially to see how the org kind of communicates with their player base is by Twitter. By far, yeah. It's one of the go-tos that not a lot of people really get, and I think a lot of orgs do is their communication, like of just making fun of little things, and certain orgs that really stand out would be things like G2, Dark Zero, and people like orgs like that, especially within Siege, that are willing to, you know, put aside a lot of the professional side of it, and to really go with, you know, let's just, if we make fun of ourselves, we make fun of ourselves.
They need to be part of the community, right? And even if you take Twitter, that is 2-3% of the Siege player base are on Twitter, maybe. You're basically reaching almost no one. So you have to at least do well on Twitter, because there's so much else out there as well, right? You want to be known there so those people can share it with their friends, and you can build some stuff around it during events as well. Have some style to your team, so people know who you are, and they can root for you. If you do that, then I mean, Pingo retiring today, right? So with him, he has built so much, and it's not just because he won.
Yeah,
like he did win, and that helps a lot. But he built a lot of stuff around his name, where people know who he is, and even if he stops playing now, he can still continue doing this for a long time, right? There's going to be a lot of people where if they stop today, they wouldn't be able to do the same thing. And and you probably have to be careful of that because it is really hard to go back to a normal job after having played competitive.
And it's something that I think really hit the Siege community really hard, and something that I don't think a lot of people really understood is the impact. It's not only, I mean, just the growth. I mean, that was something that was quite big on Twitter, I think like a week or so ago. People going over like the biggest glow up in terms of players for Siege, and everyone's pretty much going down the same lines of Pengu or Doki, and just.
Well, I mean, that was because
translated.
Doki got banned for toxic behavior and sat out his ban and turned it around. That that's impressive. Because a lot of people would probably have given up. If you get told you can't compete for 6 months or 12 months or whatever it might be, I mean, the same with Shaiko. Like you get locked out for a certain amount of time, and instead of being moany about it, you sit down, you dedicate yourself, and you say, okay, I'm just gonna grind through it. I'll come back whenever the ban of the sanction is over, and then I'll prove my worth there, right? That's super impressive. And I mean, Pingu is the first to say that his glow up has been pretty damn noticeable as well. Like, he's probably one of the people in Siege that I respect the most in terms of how much he has changed. It's insane. Like, he went from a bit of an annoying boy to quite the man. And hey, credit where credit is due, man.
Yeah, and it's certainly something that I think Doki touched on quite a bit when he was on Industry Insights last season, and something that he was very thankful that Native Sensei kept him on. And I think it really just goes to show how much they value their content creation, especially with bringing on you, keeping him on as a content creator. And that's something that a lot of people really don't think about as well when it comes to when these big esports organizations you do also need to grow that content creation side of that as well.
Yeah, but I also think that from an org standpoint, it is also a PR risk to remove people in that situation, because if they do, there's a chance that the community gets angry at you, and they're like, how often have we seen that where people just freak out and they go, why aren't you backing up your players, right? So there's a good incentive to keeping them around. Plus, if you're actually like, if you put in work in the organization and you have value to them, you're probably gonna stay. That is, at the end of the day, it's just business. It's work, and you are hired to do a job. I think a lot of people miss that, and they think that when you join an org, it's just you're there purely because you're good at shooting people in the face in video games. Like, there is a job. You have to do certain things at certain times. There's obligations, things you can't do. There's like, you can't just go on Twitter and be a dumbass every day. That's not gonna work. You're gonna get kicked, right? There's gonna be sponsors that are not willing to sponsor the org, or they're gonna drop the amount of pay that they give the org if they have players that are acting out too much. So things kind of change when you go from being a tier 4, tier 3 player, and you get an offer on a big boy org all of a sudden, and you get a lot of eyes on you. First off, a ton of people are going to want to see you fail, and they're going to do everything they can. They will scroll through all your old tweets. They will check everything all the time. If there's any dirt there, it's going to come back and haunt you. And then you need to know how the fuck you're going to deal with that when it happens, right? Like, just own up to it and say, yep, that happened. That was how I was. I'm different now, blah, blah, blah. And if you do catch some trouble like Doki did, for example, we'll figure out if you want to sit it out and then come back, because once the debt is paid, then there's no hard feelings within the community, at least. It might be from some of the viewers or people. There's often this idea or this thing where people build their own little story about what happened. Like, there's a lot of stories in Siege that have nothing to do with reality, where people think that certain things happen, and they're kind of living, like, those stories are living happily in the communities and on Reddit, and they have nothing to do with reality. But some of the things just can't be shared because, like, people sign contracts. There are certain things that you just can't go out and tell. And then people have these very, very, very strict ideas about this is exactly what happened, and no one can correct them. Because everyone that actually knows what's going on, are kind of locked in by an NDA or something like that, or just don't want to harm them or or friends or teammates, right? So a lot of stuff happens in every esport that
Yeah.
the public perception might not be as close to reality as they think.
So now you've said you said the word fuck so far in this broadcast.
Yeah,
How does that work on a official broadcast then?
it doesn't.
So for casting an invitational, have you had any slip ups or any sort of backlash from it?
The worst I've ever done is I said holy shit, and I think production went careful, but it didn't go too far. But I've tried to get someone to believe that he hot mic'd. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, that's production always mutes our microphones, or we have a button that we hold down. And he said, fuck this shit, after a really long and very annoying game, and we just needed a break. And I turn around, I hold my push or talk back button, and look at him and say, you just hot mic'd, and he just went completely pale. And the problem with it isn't that, like, we're all adults and we're shooting people in video games, there's blood everywhere. It's not that fuck is the end all be all, but on a US broadcast it just is. Because there are some laws with how many times you can say fuck on a like public PG broadcast thingy. If it gets like sent to radio, televised, if it's publicly available or whatever it is they call it, there are some limits with how many times you can say that, and you get one free, and after that you get fined. And like everyone in every production I've ever worked in where it's in NA at least, you always get told like you can't do it. It's a massive no if it happens. I don't know, it's probably not, well, it's definitely not the same in Europe. In Europe you can say it as many times as you want, but I think as long as it's being run and shown in US, they still have to follow that same thing. And it's something that goes far back to some radio broadcast laws where there was I think it's 7 words you can't say on radio or something. You can look that up and you can see what the list is. It's just not allowed.
So the same kind of things apply with sort of sponsorships, or say if you're sponsored by HyperX, you mentioned Logitech.
I know, so that it's a lot different. If an event is sponsored by something, there might be some limitations to what, like they don't like. A good example is in CS, there was a sponsor that jumped off the second they found out that there was terrorists in Counter-Strike. They didn't want to sponsor it because you could play as terrorists. And there's a lot of stuff happening with that in sponsors in general, but most of the stuff you see that sponsor, they kind of know about the gaming community, right? So it's more when you bring in like stuff from the outside, if you bring in clothing brands or car brands or something that normally never has anything to do with gaming, they can be extremely picky about it. But you're not going to see like Logitech or Crucial or HyperX or something go, yeah, you know what, you can't swear. At least not on any organization or like private individual or anything like that. They're not going to be picky with that. Like, don't be a shitty human and then you're probably going to be fine.
I mean, that's something we were talking about before we went live, just in our chat on Discord. And, we were saying of the few memorable slip-ups on stream. Who do you think, of all people, you can choose not to answer this if you wish, who do you think has the hardest time keeping their mouth shut on, or just trying not to say things on stream?
Oh, well, so that's difficult because there's a difference between having a hard time keeping your mouth shut and then purposely not keeping it shut. One of the funniest things I've seen, and I feel so bad, was when Golden Boy was doing the interview with Fabian. So there was a lot that happened there. Those where Fabian got all the fuck bombs and kind of broke the limit of how many times you can say that as well. But Golden Boy walked up there being told by production that he was going to interview Pengu. And as he's walking up there, he's thinking that this doesn't look right. Like, this isn't Pengu. And I feel so bad for him because that, like, at the end of the day, that was fully a production mess up. It's not his fault. It's just not his fault because he has to trust what he's being told. Like, that's how it works, right? You have people sitting there saying, this is the person, this is what you need to do. You can't just second guess it and then do your own thing. So that was super unfortunate. I have an immense difficult time whenever I'm on air not swearing. because I swear like a sailor in real life and on stream normally. But when we're on, like, if we're on invite or invitational at the big stage, I am sweating profusely before we start, and like getting all my swear words out, because I really don't want to open it up with saying I'm fucking excited or something. That'd be horrible. Oh, we got the list of all the things we couldn't say.
Yeah, I put it. You intrigued me, so I stuck it in the Discord chat. You can tell that it was made in the US.
Yeah, and it's also fairly old.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that is very popular, and especially the British vocabulary.
It's just funny that you can't say shit or piss.
Well, yeah, that is the kind of thing of
like they're not that harmful, right? It's
well, this is the big thing that happened. Going slightly off of esports, it's something that I think one of the biggest TV shows that got hit by this, and they made so many episodes on it, was Family Guy, when they switched to the bleep over.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, no one realized how not limiting, because that's saying that like you're not free to do what you want, but how you have to really watch what you say.
Well, it's just funny because you can say some really, really horrible stuff without using any of those words. And I mean, you can say some really, really bad stuff without using any horrible words at all, right? But yeah, it's a surprising list of...
Yeah, you mentioned some brands with Counter-Strike did want to be involved due to the word terrorist being sort of associated with the game.
Yeah.
With Siege, it's different. It's different police forces around the world. Do you think it might ever get to a point where it becomes problematic to the game, or?
No, probably not, because they have their whole... Like, there are a few things you can't do. They can't write FBI in a certain way. It has to be portrayed differently. There are probably a few things they can't use, like patches on certain operators. Take Blackbeard, for example, with the multicam uniform. They need to have the rights to multicam to be able to use them in game. So there are certain camouflages that you just won't see in game unless they buy the rights to them. They had the rights to the multicam stuff from when they were doing the Ghost Recon games. That's the only reason they can show that. Otherwise, it would have to be something else. I think from a sponsor point of view, like, there's definitely got to be some that don't want to work with it because of that, but I don't think that's the biggest loss. There are plenty of people willing to invest that aren't picky with if there's a little bit of blood or something like that. I mean, the bigger issue is if countries have problems with it, right? Like, China doesn't like skeletons, gambling, drugs, and blood. And I think there's some other stuff that is just illegal to show.
I mean, there was that massive patch that everyone kept. I think that was one of the biggest uprising I've ever seen in this community.
Yeah.
Was when I don't know if it was a miscommunication, if it was only China that was going to sell that patch as the game, or if it was going to change everything. But I think especially
the original post they put out was that they were going to remove blood, drugs, and skulls, and gambling. It, like, at the end of the day, like, it wouldn't have mattered, right? Like no one would have given a shit if they make the blood a different color. You know what? People would probably be happy because it would be easier to see. Like, there's still people complaining that they sell blood or it was, masking out stuff. Slot machines, like, who cares if there's slot machines? Who cares if there's cocaine on a pool table in a map? Like, it's not that important. We can just call it flour. Literally put a flower sticker on top of the box, right, and you're fine.
Just a little bag next to it.
Yeah, and the skull icons would change. The bigger thing is, like, people were angry that the policies of a faraway country from them was going to have an impact on the game that were completely fine for them. And, like, I get that people get pissed about it, but it probably ended up costing a metric shit ton of money, right? Like, because as far as I understand, the game is playable in China, which means there must be a Chinese version that doesn't have skulls.
Well, yeah, because they released a load of screenshots, didn't they? And most of which changed Clubhouse, if I'm not mistaken, because you have Strip, and then you have the corridor coming out before the rework.
Yeah, they changed
And
the neon sign on the girl
Yeah.
and strip, and then they changed like 3 slot machines.
Mm.
It's
That's what was the
just,
most backlash. Was just a neon sign.
but I assume that now, like
Mm.
where we are now, it probably doesn't matter. Like for them to run 2 versions and then maybe have 1 or 2 maps where like they still need to have different language for it. There must be some UI adaptations as well you have to do with Chinese language compared to like it doesn't matter if you're writing it in French or English, it's still the same letters. But with Chinese, or I don't know how that works with the UI, how it scales. So there's gotta be some extra work there anyway.
Mm.
But it's so many players, so it's worth it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be a massive player base, especially if they're not really hitting on, or that it's just a load of players that they can reach. But
Yeah.
just
It'd be
aren't able
foolish
to.
not to do it.
Mm.
Right? Like, you're not saying no to going to what 1/7 of the world's population.
Mm.
Like, you want to give them a chance to play.
Mm.
That was why, like, when this whole thing happened, I would rather have had that we just all went, we don't really give a fuck, just do it, right? Like, just have one version for everyone, where it's the same. Especially if people start competing at one point, what do we do then?
Mm.
What if we have to have a Chinese team compete against an American team at some point?
Mm.
What version do they play on?
Oh, jeez, I never thought about that kind of way of looking at it. I would just automatically assume they would use the toned down version of the game and hope that viewers don't notice, but they would.
I actually don't know how it works. So Dota did it. Dota has some of the characters that look different in the Chinese version.
Hmm.
There is one character, like the guy with the meat hook. I can't remember what he's called. He looks like a straw man in the Chinese version, or like a scarecrow. But I don't know if they were to play against each other, which version would be played.
Mm.
But it's a lot of trouble for, right?
Well, it's a lot of trouble over nothing, but it's especially in esports, nothing can become so big in just a matter of hours.
Yeah, I get people's frustration. Sometimes people put a lot of energy into some very, very small things, and it ends up like that's what they don't get. It ends up creating, it slows the whole process down, because if something blows up on Twitter, it might not force a change, but it will force a meeting, right? So people will sit down and have a meeting and a talk about it. How do we deal with this? What do we do? And it might push other things that would otherwise have been ready in time, or other things that would have come out. Like, I will promise you that the community in every single game has pushed updates or patches or changes to be delayed by trying to ask to get them faster, because they had to like go in and do some patchworking or try to put out a fire somewhere. Like sometimes the thing people are freaking out about is like 2 weeks away, and it causes for like an emergency meeting, right? Oh, now we have to put out a blog post or something to say that it's coming. Please, sorry. It's.
I think that was definitely seen with the Zofia withstand ability being taken away. Of that was in the works for quite a while.
Yes.
And all it took was one game, one round of a relegation match for the entire Twitter sphere to just blow up.
Funny thing is that people take it as if it's a win right after, right? So I think honestly they should probably have waited with Stand and just put it out like half a year from now when people stop complaining about it, because when they put it out like a week or 2 weeks after everyone was screaming about it, now it looks like the community got exactly what they wanted by screaming, and it's not a good precedence to set. But at least everyone that kind of is in the industry is kind of vocal about saying that this is something that's been like half a year, right? Like it has nothing to do with anyone freaking out on Twitter. This was happening either way. It was coming, and like it's kind of tough that people think that Withstand got taken away because they screamed on Twitter. Like it has nothing to do with that. It's a long way coming. The same with a lot of the changes, right? Like Goyo's change, for example.
Yeah.
That we've seen on TS. that stuff has probably been in the works for a long time as well. But sometimes, like, maybe by the time that it's out and some of these changes are happening, the thing isn't really a problem anymore. Warden was the perfect counter to the Glass Ying meta. But the Glass Ying meta died out before Warden came in, right? So most things will be changed or fixed in time, but it takes a long time.
So taking a step back onto sort of the different game versions we have between sort of Western and the Chinese version, it's like Riot Games have their own guidelines for all tournament organisers to follow. So however big or small the event is, the game's viewable across all regions, and they've
Yeah.
also got a broadcast friendly mode, so it turns blood into like a blue splash, and then the bomb's also renamed to a spike. Could be something sort of Siege implements at some point, maybe to
Yeah, I'm not a fan
help
of
between that region gap.
the broadcast thing. I'm really not a fan of. Riot can get away with it because they're infinitely big and have more money than you can ask for. But there is a community aspect to esport that that is one of the things that make us a little different than everything else. Is that it doesn't matter where you're from, how old you are, if you're like nothing matters other than if you're good at what you do. That's it, right? You could be 9 feet tall or 5 foot. It doesn't matter. There's no, like, you can be Doki and you can still be really good at video games, right? And we can do it across countries and everything. If we start having like regulations forced by the developer of the game and we don't allow people to make their own tournaments, and like it could be the same for this, right? Like you could be under a full strict rule set if you just want to talk about or at least do it as part of the Siege community. Nothing in theory stops Ubisoft from stopping anyone from streaming Siege. Like you don't have the right to play the game and stream it, right? That's not a given right. That's just because they choose not to DMCA your ass, because it would be really dumb. But Nintendo has done that. Nintendo has taken people down that were streaming Nintendo games, right? It's pretty dumb, and doesn't help a lot. I think the only reason Ryan get away with it is because of how like massively big they are. I'm fine with a broadcast mode, but at the end of the day, like I don't know, it becomes like a more political issue. I really don't think we should try and keep like a bit of blood splatter away from the 13-year-olds watching video games. Like they're doing much worse stuff, man, already, right? Like it's not like them hearing one bad word or seeing a blood splat is gonna have any negative impact on them at all.
Don't tell the media that they're very stuck in their ways. That
yeah, so Illinois is trying to ban GTA.
Yeah, it's something that I'm so happy it's kind of like dove out of the media in the past few years, because I certainly remember even like 5 years ago how it was so very prominent, and I'm glad the UK has gone the direction we've gone in, because it's still slightly taboo with esports, but it's becoming more acceptable. And I remember still like 5 years ago reading news articles saying of how bad video games are. You see them a lot less now.
Well, there was a massive political thing in Denmark. If you go for so the game Hitman is Danish, and we've had a lot of stuff about that in TV. So going all the way back to Hitman 1, there was some outrage. People were freaking out. The fact that you could go in and play this like murder fantasy where you're a serial killer going around killing people for hire. The news were outraged. And a Danish politician or stand-up comedian, I can't remember, it's so long ago, went on the news and said he thought it was ridiculous that they got pissed off by that, but yet they were giving so much credit to another Danish movie that came out with someone portraying a rapist, right? That, like, they were giving credit to that, and oh, it was so beautiful, it was so well done, like, good job on that guy, perfect actor, amazing. So that was completely fine to have that movie, but to have the video game, no, that was just horrendous, right? And I think the movie was 16 plus, and the video game was 16 plus. It's for the same age group. It doesn't matter, right? I that's probably a bigger problem. If the parents could just talk a bit to their kids, they can probably get away with playing a bit of shooter games here and there.
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing I'm going to do is kind of throw it to chat a little bit here. If you guys have anything you kind of want us to talk about, or any questions you got, something we did a lot last season, especially when it came to, especially in the Discord. So yeah, anything you guys want to kind of ask as we ramble on and waffle just for a little bit longer. And I don't know, what do you think of franchising in esports from Jacob?
Oh, I love the idea, but I love the idea of franchising. I hate the way it's been implemented. I hate the way Overwatch did it, for example. I think it's horrendous, but it's because if you do it, in Overwatch there was a team that was given a spot. So for most people, I think the spots started out costing a couple 100,000, and the spots turned into costing $1 million or more. There was a team that couldn't afford to buy a spot, so they got a spot gifted. That stuff pisses me off, because then there's no point. And there needs to be, the organizations need to have enough money that they can, they need to guarantee that they can pay for the people involved in their esport and in their organization for that amount of time. I just don't think it's necessary yet. Like, eventually, at some point, we're going to have to get it, because no one is going to want to invest in a team where the players could just leave. So the spot will have to be the team's spot and not the player spot. Eventually, it has to. Can you imagine in football if the biggest football teams, all the players could just leave and make their own? It's not going to work, right? So franchising will probably eventually happen no matter what. But for now, I don't think we need to be there yet. Like, what Siege is doing right now is like half franchising, right? Like, there's some incentive with team skins and with being involved with having, if you have players, you have support staff, you have content creators, you're creating content, you're a positive thing for the community, then you have your team skin, and like there's incentives to being part of it and staying around. I think that's good enough for now. But if we were to double the viewership and the player base, yeah, I'd probably franchise it.
And something, yeah, more on that, especially from Zodi. What do you think of the R6 World Cup?
Oh,
it was something that was given. We got a little bit of information about. We didn't get all too much.
I honestly think it's kind of weird. Like, I mean, sure, why not? But it's just kind of weird. Like, we have competition. We actually had so much competition that people didn't have time to watch all the competition. And I don't know. Like, I'm weird when it comes to that. I don't like the idea of like the teams that you're playing for Denmark or you're playing for, like, why? I think the good thing about esport is that we can have 5 people from 5 different countries on the same team. Sure, like, if they want to have it and they want to make it a spectacle, great. I just don't really see it being that interesting to watch. Like, there's going to be some countries that are going to be crazy for their teams, right? Like, they're super hyped. They're going to make insanely good content around it. And that's probably going to be great. But, like, how many countries can you find that actually have 5 really high tier players and could get a really good team together? Because there's already some teams there that are like France, Germany, UK, US, Brazil. Like, some of those already have full 5-stack rosters that are like world tier, like the best, right? Why not just let them play the way they are already doing it? Right? It just seems like a waste, to be honest.
I mean, I feel like, especially when they announced the R6 World Cup, was also when they started announcing a bunch of, smaller regional cups. We had the EUCL revamp, the 9 regional leagues. I kind of feel like that's taken its place more since they've taken off a little bit more. Because especially with UKIN, a lot of national divisions are implementing a second division.
Yeah, I like that idea of the of the national teams and the way that you can like kind of earn your way up in the system. But I wish that the people playing in them all realized like how far you could actually get. You can get all the way from Nordic Championship to Pro League by just following the system, right?
We saw Kawanda do that this year.
Yeah,
I mean they went from Nats to Pro League and it just in under a year.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as it's being used for that, it's amazing. The only downside to it is that you have to have majority of players from a country or region, right? I don't necessarily think that's the best thing to do in esport. I don't see why there's any benefit to having 5 Danish people on a team as to having 5 Scandinavian people on one team, right? And then sure, okay, you have Nordic Cup, so it could be 5 Scandinavian. But with the French league, for example, you need 3 out of 5 French.
Yeah.
What if you do better if you have 2, right? And then you qualify through that. Once you then qualified, you can just swap your players and have the other ones that you want there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, like I think it is without a doubt gonna cause a few people to make their way there just to get kicked, because they can find better players that can fill the same roles the second that they qualify, and that's a little shitty because it's gonna deter some people from it.
Yeah. I think probably have the last one here for today because we're almost bordering on that hour mark. Another one from Jacob. Do you think doing single day events, for example, like football, where you have 2 crowds travel to watch a single match, are worth doing?
If we ever break 500,000 viewers on one stream, yeah. Like if you can't fill a stadium, then no.
Mm-hmm.
Because just setting up, just the stage work, just getting the gaffers, the rigging crews, all of that stuff, right? Flying the teams in, having production, everything. Hiring talent, like that's not cheap either, right? And then getting the crowd in. Unless you do it like dude, I don't even know, like, are football events even making that much money, or is it just mainly through sponsors? It's probably mainly through sponsors and stickers around the. I don't know, man. Like, ticket sales can't be enough. There's no way that that's enough by itself. It has to be like 50% ticket sales, 50% sponsors, or more on the sponsor side. Yeah, sure, you can probably make it work, but I think we're quite far away from that right now.
Well, and then a final question here from Long Strange Trip. It says, do you like whiskey?
He already knows my favorite. Yamasaki 12-year-old if you're buying me one long.
I think that just about concludes our time. Thank you so much for jumping on, talking to us.
Thanks so much for having
me on the esports. It's been a great hour. It's been great fun. And yeah, thank you everyone else who's come to watch. Absolutely amazing to see so many of you here. And we are going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be starting at 7 p.m. tomorrow with Zach from DZ. And thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you so much, Santa and Zironic. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks for having me.
Catch you later.